Top 14 G-Shock watches, ranked by price, 2026 edition. Casio built a watch that survived a 3-story drop, a military training course, and 17 years inside a mechanic's toolbox. They also built one that costs $8,000 and barely leaves its box. Same brand, same logo, same promise, but completely different answers to the same question. How much is Unbreakable worth? This is not a review. Reviews tell you whether a watch is good. This is a ranking. 14 models, from $75 to $8,000, stacked in price order so you can see exactly what changes. Every entry gets 2 things: the reason people love it and the flaw almost nobody talks about before they buy. By the time we reach number 1, you will understand something about this brand that most collectors took years to figure out. 14 G-Shock Ring Watch GWC, $1075. The pitch of this watch sounded like a dare. What if we took a fully functional G-Shock, stopwatch, dual time zone, digital display, alarm, and made it small enough to wear on your finger? Casio engineers apparently decided that was a reasonable Tuesday. The GWC-10 is a working 6-digit module shrunk to roughly 1/10 scale. It tells the time. It runs a stopwatch. It has dual time zones. It does all of this from a ring you slide onto your finger like you are about to propose to someone who really appreciates Japanese engineering. There is even a feature called the twinkle light, a little pulse of illumination that fires at preset intervals, unprompted, just to let you know it is still there. Casio, a company not known for whimsy, built a watch that winks at you. On Watch You Seek forums, the GWC-10 thread reads like a comedy special. Grown men deeply excited about a ring. Sentences like, "It actually keeps time accurately," typed with genuine relief. The problem: a miniature battery that will eventually need replacing, inside a case that does not open easily. The ring also comes in one meaningful size, US 10.5, with spacers to go smaller. If your fingers run narrow or wide, the GWC-10 is not a watch for your hand. It is a watch for the hand it was designed for. Somewhere, a father bought one for his 10-year-old as a birthday gift. The kid wore it for 3 weeks straight. Battery died. They are both still trying to figure out how to open it. $75. Remarkable engineering. Practically useless for half the population. Well spent if the finger fits. A ring watch is one thing. The next one went to space. 13. The NASA standard DW5600E1V, $75. In the late 80s, NASA needed a watch for astronauts that could survive the thermal shock of re-entry, the vacuum of low Earth orbit, and the particular chaos of living inside a metal tube traveling at 17,000 miles per hour. They tested a lot of watches. The DW5600E passed. This is the only watch on this list that has been flight qualified for space travel. That is not a marketing claim. It is a certification that required the watch to pass tests that most watches cannot even start. Extreme temperature ranges, shock resistance, radiation exposure. The DW5600E cleared all of them. The thing costs $75. The same $75 as the ring watch I told you about at number 14. But where the GWC-10 is a novelty, the DW5600E is a control group. When Casio engineers need to know if a new material holds up, this is the watch they compare it against. It is the baseline, the benchmark, the thing that everything else has to beat. Drop it. Leave it in a car in July. Take it swimming. It responds to all of this with complete indifference. Here is what nobody who buys this watch expects. The top left button, which is the adjust button. It is recessed so deeply into the case that you need a fingernail to press it. This was intentional. Accidental presses in orbit could be catastrophic, but on the ground, it is mildly infuriating. The other thing, it beeps. Every hour, the watch emits a small, polite, completely unmutable chirp. There is no way to turn it off. People have sat through meetings, church services, and first dates with this watch quietly announcing the passage of time to the entire room. Which of these quirks would stop you from buying it? A volunteer firefighter described wearing this watch through a house fire. The watch came through without a mark, and he still wears it. That is what $75 buys at this level. Not features, not aesthetics, just a guarantee in watchmaking that it will be there when you need it. $75 twice. But the next watch broke the mold entirely, and the mold was 40 years old. 12. The Casio GA21001 A1, $110. In 2019, Casio released a watch that did not look like a G-Shock. The GA2100 had octagonal case shaping. It had a slim profile. It had analog hands layered over a digital display. It was 11.8 millimeters thin, the slimmest G-Shock ever produced at that point. Watch forums noticed it immediately, not because of what it was, because of what it looked like. It looked like an Audemars Piguet Royal Oak, 45 years of Swiss prestige, available at a pharmacy for $110. The nickname arrived within weeks, Cassioke. It spread fast enough that Casio eventually acknowledged it with a wink. What made the GA2100 remarkable beyond the aesthetics? The carbon core guard structure. The case looks slim and low-key, but contains a carbon-reinforced inner shell that absorbs impact before it reaches the module. You get the silhouette of a luxury sports watch and the durability of something you could throw down a flight of stairs. The GA2100 changed who buys G-Shocks. Suddenly, people who had never considered the brand, people who wore dress watches, fashion watches, Swiss watches, were wearing this on their wrists. $110, sitting next to $5,000 watches at dinner tables. The flaw is as famous as the watch. The all-black version, the one most people want, is genuinely difficult to read. The LCD display is small. The analog hands cross over it at specific times and block the digits entirely. In low light, you are estimating. A watch that does not comfortably tell the time is an interesting philosophical problem, and the Casio sits right in the middle of it. The watch collector who bought it to wear casually now wears it everywhere, knows he cannot always read it. Does not care, because nobody looking at it knows he cannot read it. That is the Casio. The Casio shook the industry. The watch coming next at number 11 decided to do everything properly instead. 11 gigawatts M5610U1, $155. The 1983 G-Shock silhouette is one of the most recognizable shapes in watchmaking history. Square, chunky, built like a small bunker. Casio could have left it alone. For decades, they essentially did. Then they released the GW M5610U and quietly loaded it with everything the original silhouette was missing. Tough solar charging. The watch runs on light, any light, and the battery becomes irrelevant. And multiband 6 atomic timekeeping, which means 6 transmitting stations around the world, in Japan, the United States, the United Kingdom, Germany, and China, are constantly sending out radio signals carrying the exact time. The GW M5610U picks one up, corrects itself, and is never wrong. Set it once, never adjust it again. It self-corrects for daylight saving. It self-corrects for time zone changes. People have worn this watch for 6 years without touching a setting. On WatchCrunch, someone described it as the watch equivalent of a smoke alarm. You forget it exists until the moment you actually need it. The flaw is a texture complaint, which sounds minor until you've worn a watch with a bad strap for 12 hours. The resin on this model is firmer than the softer urethane found on higher-tier G-Shocks. On smaller wrists, the strap does not hug the curve of the arm properly. There is a gap, a lift, a slight awkwardness that you feel all day. Not painful, just a present. A small, persistent reminder that perfection is available at a higher price point. $155 for a watch that is never wrong and never dies. The entry price for set it and forget it. For most people who discover this watch, it becomes their benchmark for everything else. That was the perfectionist's choice. Number 10. Trades precision for performance data and introduces the one thing G-Shock traditionally avoided. 10. The Gym Tank. GBA 900G Squad. $160. G-Shock's reputation was built on surviving things. Drops, water, mud, time. The GBA 900 asked a different question. What if a G-Shock could also track whether you are getting faster? Inside the GBA, 900 is an accelerometer that measures movement patterns precisely enough to calculate running pace and distance. No GPS, no chest strap, no charging cable. The fitness tracking is entirely self-contained, powered by light, running indefinitely. For gym members and casual runners who do not want another device to charge, this was genuinely new territory for the brand. The watch syncs to Casio's smartphone app via Bluetooth, which is where the enthusiasm tends to cool slightly. The Bluetooth handshake is not always reliable. On older Android phones in particular, the connection drops, the sync fails, and the app does not always tell you this has happened. You finish a run thinking your data transferred. You open the app. Nothing. A Reddit thread about this specific issue has been active since 2021. Casio's response has been firmware updates. User opinion on whether those updates fixed it varies considerably depending on which phone you own. The deeper issue. The GBA 900 wants to be a fitness watch. The fitness watch market has Apple, Garmin, and Polar, all of which do more, track more, and integrate more cleanly with third-party apps. The GBA 900 is better at surviving than it is at tracking. That is probably the right trade-off. But it creates a watch that does not quite belong to either world. There is a specific kind of buyer who finds this watch perfect. The gym regular, who does not want a screen they have to baby, who finds GPS overkill for treadmill intervals. For that person, the GBA 900 is the right answer. The community around the G Squad line on Reddit is small but loyal. People who found this watch and stopped looking, that is not a bad outcome for $160. $160. The gap between this and the watch below it is $20 and a completely different philosophy. The G Squad tried to add intelligence. Number 9 took a different approach. It fixed the Casio instead. 9. The Solar Oak. GA. B. 2100. $180. The original Casio was a style statement. The GA B2100 is the version where Casio sat down and fixed what the style statement got wrong. Solar charging. The battery conversation disappears entirely. Bluetooth time syncing, so the watch corrects itself silently in the background. Same carbon core guard protection. Same slim profile. Same octagonal case that still gets mistaken for Swiss watches at a fraction of their price. On paper, this is simply the better Casio. In practice, a lot of collectors still prefer the original, because the original was not trying to be anything except what it was. The GA B2100 is optimized. The GA 2100 was accidental. There is a difference in feel that is hard to articulate and very easy to notice. The flaw is specific and slightly ironic. The analog-digital hybrid movement is sensitive to magnetic fields. Tablet covers, certain phone cases, motorcycle tank bags, some laptop bags, all strong enough to knock the hands out of alignment while the digital display keeps showing the correct time. 2 different times on the same watch face. The fix is a hand-home position reset. Not difficult, but not something that should happen to an everyday carry. $180. The mature version of an icon. Do you own a Casio? Which one? That was the urban option. Number 8 goes somewhere the urban option was never designed to go. 8. The Survivalist. GW94001 Rangeman, $330. Every G-Shock survives drops. Every G-Shock survives water. The Rangeman was built for the person who finds all of that insufficient. 3 sensors. Altimeter, reading pressure, change to calculate elevation. Barometer, detecting atmospheric shifts to predict incoming weather before it arrives. Compass, maintaining heading orientation independent of GPS signal. These are the tools of search and rescue workers, mountain guides, serious backcountry hikers, people who make decisions based on conditions, not connectivity. The button guard structure on the Rangeman is cylindrical. Each button sits inside a raised ring that prevents mud, debris, and grit from jamming the mechanism during extended field use. The triple sensor suite puts the Rangeman in a separate category from everything ranked below it. This is not a style watch. It is a decision-making tool. The criticism? The LCD display. In 2026, it reads as dated. High-contrast MIP displays, the memory and pixel technology found on newer G-Shock models, are sharper, more readable in direct sunlight, and frankly look more modern. The Rangeman's display was fine in 2014. Against newer screens, it now looks like a previous generation of technology wrapped in current generation hardware. $330. A serious tool for serious conditions. The watch for people who treat emergency as a planning category, not a surprise. The Rangeman handles altitude. Number 7 handles something more unpleasant and more specific. 7. The Debris Specialist. GG B100 Mudmaster. $440. Search and rescue teams working mudslides, oil field technicians, forestry workers clearing trails after a flood. There is a specific category of professional who needs a watch that can survive not just water but suspended matter, mud with mass and momentum, liquid with debris inside it. For those people, water resistance ratings are almost irrelevant. What matters is whether the seals hold when something thicker than water is forcing its way into every gap. Every button on the GG B100 Mudmaster has individual gasket sealing. Not the case as a whole, each individual button. The housing uses a mud-resistant structure that accounts for vibration, not just static submersion. The watch was designed with the input of people who have actually had equipment fail in mud, which is a remarkably specific audience to build around and exactly the right one for this product. The flaw is a legitimate frustration for a $440 tool watch. It does not have solar charging. It runs on a CR2032 battery. When the battery dies, and it will die, opening the case to replace it can compromise the mud seals if not done by a professional with the right equipment. A watch built around the integrity of its seals requiring you to risk those seals for a $5 battery. Casio knows this. It has not changed. This is the kind of compromise that does not bother someone who will send it back to the manufacturer for service. It bothers everyone else. The other thing worth saying, the Mudmaster is one of the least Instagrammed G-Shocks. The aesthetic is purely functional, no octagonal case shaping, no polished surfaces, no borrowed luxury silhouette. It looks like what it is, heavy, purposeful. In a watch market that increasingly rewards looks borrowed from more expensive brands, the Mudmaster refuses to borrow from anyone. That stubbornness is exactly right for what it was built to do. A forestry worker in British Columbia mentioned on Quora that she bought hers in 2019. Wore it through 2 wildfire seasons, a flood response deployment, and 1 encounter with a chainsaw kickback that sent the watch skidding across gravel for 4 meters. She checked the time afterward. It was correct. $440. Built for conditions that most watches cannot enter. Resin and gaskets at $440. Number 6. Abandons resin entirely, and the price reflects the decision. 6G MWB 5000D1. $550. In 1983, the first G-Shock was plastic because plastic could absorb shock, metal could not. 40 years of engineering later, Casio figured out how to make metal do what plastic was doing. The GMWB 5000D1 is a completely stainless steel construction with a resin buffer hidden inside between the metal bezel and the inner case. The buffer does the absorbing, the metal does the looking. The result is a watch that carries the original 1,983 square silhouette, but reads as a luxury object. On a wrist, it does not look like the gas station watch that G-Shock's critics have been referencing for decades. It looks considered, finished. Tough solar and multiband 6 atomic timekeeping. Never wrong, never dead. The weight is 167 grams. To give that context, most stainless steel dress watches run between 80 and 120 grams. The GMW B5000D1 is wearing its engineering visibly. On larger wrists, with a proper fit, this weight is satisfying, intentional, substantial. On smaller wrists, or with the bracelet sized even slightly loose, it slides, shifts, and makes its presence loudly known with every movement. The fit matters more on this watch than on almost any other on this list. Get it wrong and the $550 watch reminds you about that mistake all day. Does the weight of a watch influence your watch buying decision? Steel and weight at $550. The next watch costs $50 more and looks like it should cost 5 times that. 5G MB2100S D1A, $600. There is a finish called dark silver that Casio applied to this watch, and it is the reason this entry exists. The GMB 2100S D1A combines circular hairline polish and mirror polish in a layered pattern across the case and bracelet. The result is a watch that, at a glance, does not look like a G-Shock. It looks like an integrated bracelet sports watch from Audemars Piguet or Vacheron Constantin, the kind of watch that costs $40,000 minimum, the kind of watch that most people reading this will never own. $600. The craftsmanship in the finishing is not approximate. It is deliberate and completely unexpected for what is still a carbon core guard G-Shock beneath the surface. Solar charging, Bluetooth sync, all of it present. But the presentation is what this watch is about. The clasp undercuts the whole proposition. Standard three-fold construction with 2 micro-adjust holes. For a watch this polished, 2 adjustment points is not enough to find a true fit. The bracelet sits right or it does not, and the margin between those 2 outcomes is narrower than the clasp allows. On forums, this comes up constantly. A watch designed to look like precision that cannot quite achieve precision on the wrist. $600. The watch that gets mistaken for something worth 10 times the price from across the room. Up close, the clasp tells a different story. That was polish and illusion. Number 4 is neither. It is something Casio has never tried before. Before we move on to the next part, let me tell you this. Most people don't realize this, but buying a watch the wrong way can cost you thousands, and you won't even notice it until it's too late. You walk into a store or browse online, and everything looks the same, but behind the scenes, there's a system. Prices aren't always fair, availability is controlled, and one bad decision can leave you overpaying for something that doesn't even hold its value. That's why I created a complete free insider guide to buying watches. Inside, you'll find the best watches to buy, the watches to avoid, and how to choose a watch that actually fits your style and budget long-term. The goal is simple. I'll help you stop guessing and start buying smart. You'll find the free guide in the pinned comment and description. Now, let's move on to the next part. 4GMWBZ5000R C1 Rainbow Metal, $970. A 2026 release, and a genuine departure. Casio used AI-driven structural analysis during the design of the GMWBZ5000RC1, specifically, to map exactly where shock forces travel through the case and optimize the placement of the internal resin protectors accordingly. Not AI as a marketing word, AI as an engineering tool applied to the actual physics of impact absorption. The exterior result is a gradient rainbow ion plating across the entire case. Depending on the angle of light, the watch shifts through violet, blue, green, gold. A photograph does not capture it accurately. In person, it is the most visually active watch on this list. The community response has been genuinely split. A Quora thread from early 2026 runs for 63 responses. Half of them are from people who think it is the most interesting G-Shock ever released. The other half are from people who think Casio made a fashion piece and called it engineering. Both groups have a point. The vapor deposition coating on the crystal, the coating that creates the rainbow effect, reduces contrast on the digital display. In direct sunlight, the negative display becomes difficult to read. A watch whose most striking feature actively interferes with its core function. Casio engineered it smarter and finished it in a way that works against what they built. $970. For someone who wants a wearable art object that can also survive being thrown down a staircase, this is the only option on this list. AI engineering met luxury finish. The next one, at the same price, went somewhere completely different. It went racing. 3GWG B1000 TLC, $970. Same price. Completely different philosophy. The GWG B1000 TLC is a collaboration with Team Land Cruiser, the Toyota-affiliated motorsport team that competes in the Dakar Rally, one of the most brutal off-road racing events on the calendar. 17 days, 10,000 kilometers, terrain that destroys purpose-built vehicles regularly. The bezel on this watch is forged carbon, not carbon fiber look-alike print. Actual forged carbon composite, used in aerospace and motorsport for its combination of rigidity and reduced mass. The result is a bezel that is lighter than metal and structurally more resistant to impact. The dial references Toyota's navigation display aesthetics, functional, and specific in a way that makes sense only when you understand the collaboration. This watch was not designed to be worn to a meeting. It was designed to be worn over a sleeve in a vehicle moving across a Saharan salt flat at 140 kilometers per hour. The honest problem? 52 plus millimeters wide. It will not fit under a shirt cuff. It barely fits beside one. This is an exclusive use watch. It comes out when it belongs, and it stays home when it does not. That reality sits uncomfortably against a $970 price point. Buyers discover this after purchase more often than before it. Someone who bought one described it on Watch You Seek as the watch I love most and wear least. That sentence should be on the box. Forged carbon and Rally DNA. Number 2 is quieter, thinner, and more expensive, and it rewrote what the top of the G-Shock lineup could be. 2MTG B3000, $1,100. Most high-end watches get thicker as the engineering gets more serious. The MTG B3000 went the other direction. The dual-core guard structure integrates the case back and the lug assembly into a single machined piece of metal. No joints, no seams, no separate components bolted together. One piece, engineered to distribute impact through the structure rather than between parts. The result is the thinnest high-end G-Shock ever produced. Under the thickness benchmark that separates a watch, you can comfortably slide under a dress shirt cuff from a watch you cannot. The MTG line sits above the standard G-Shock range. It is Casio's engineering showpiece, the line where the brief is apparently, what would this look like if we did not compromise anything? The B3000 sits at the top of that line, and wearing it feels different from wearing any other G-Shock. Not heavier, denser, more resolved, like the engineering has nowhere left to go. The strap situation is the argument the forums never finish. The MTG B3000 uses proprietary lug geometry. No standard 22mm strap fits it. You are committed to Casio's one-touch strap system and the aftermarket options that fit that system. For watch enthusiasts who change straps seasonally, who have NATO straps in 7 colors, who express personality through bracelet choice, this is a meaningful limitation. The watch decides what it wears. You don't. This bothers a particular kind of buyer. The G-Shock collector who came up through resin models, who learned to swap straps, who treats customization as part of ownership, they find the MTG B3000's proprietary system quietly alienating. Not a deal breaker. Just a reminder that at $1,100, Casio is making decisions about your watch that you are not part of. Buyers who came to this watch from dress watches or tool watches find the strap situation barely a footnote. They wear what it comes with. It looks right. That is enough. $1,100. The most serious watch you can buy before the #1 entry changes the conversation completely. $1,100 and the thinnest high-end G-Shock Casio has ever built. What comes next costs $8,000 and is made by hand. 1 MRG B2000 KT3A Hana Basara, $8,000. $8,000. You saw that right. It is not a limited edition in the collector sense of, they made 500. It is a production watch from Casio's MRG line, the tier above MTG, the tier that operates in a different world entirely from everything else on this list. Take a moment with the gap. The #2 watch costs $1,100. This one costs $8,000. That jump is not one tier. It is a different category of object. The MRG B2000KT 3A's bezel is made from cobarium, a cobalt alloy developed in Japan that is 4 times harder than stainless steel. More scratch-resistant than sapphire crystal in its surface hardness class, a luster comparable to platinum. That bezel is not machined by a computer. It is hand-cut and hand-polished by a master gemstone cutter, specifically using the techniques of Basara armor making, a Japanese craft tradition from feudal metalwork. The motifs on the case echo samurai armor construction, not as decoration, as structural logic translated into watchmaking. The finishing on this watch is so precise and so fragile relative to its G-Shock siblings that something strange happens to many of its owners. They stop wearing it. A thread on Watch You Seek, started in 2023 and still active, asks a single question. Does anyone actually wear their MRG? Response after response from owners of $8,000 watches who admit, sometimes sheepishly, sometimes with resigned humor, that they keep it in a watch box. They take it out to look at it. They photograph it. They do not take it to places where it might get scratched. The MRG carries the full G-Shock promise. Drop it, dunk it, beat it. But the hand finishing makes that promise feel reckless. The man who wore it into the garden once has not done it again. Not because the watch couldn't handle it. Because he could not. $8,000 for the most technically accomplished, most beautifully finished, most underused G-Shock in existence. Nobody keeps something in a box because they do not love it. 14 watches, $75 to $8,000, the same brand name on every one. Here's the thing nobody tells you when you start looking at this lineup. The engineering does not peak at number 1, it peaks at about number 11. From there, what you are buying is craft. The human decision to spend more time, more care, more skill on the same underlying promise. The Hanabasara does not keep better time than the GW M5610U. It does not survive harder drops. It just carries more intention in the object, more hours in a workshop, more history in the finish. Most people in this hobby spend years figuring out which of those things they actually want. The watch that survives everything, or the watch that means something. The best answer, if you are honest with yourself, is probably not $8,000. But knowing why it costs $8,000 tells you more about what you value than any watch review will. So, which watch caught your eye? Let me know in the comments. Like that video and subscribe for more.